Here's the thing. It's been a minute since I published a Real Buzz video, but as you may know, there's a pretty big superhero movie coming out this weekend. And as you may not know, there's also a really interesting dramatic crime thriller coming out as well that I really need to put you onto. So, let's get to it. For those of you who don't know my rating system, it goes like this. I've identified 5 aspects of a film that matter to me: acting and casting, visual effects and editing, story and message, entertainment value, music score and soundtrack, and an additional category for personal preference. Because that arbitrary sense of whether I enjoyed the movie is worth consideration too. For each of these categories, I assign a value of 0, 1, or 2. The sum total of these values lands the final rating of the film on this scale. For both films in this video, I'll discuss my thoughts on each category and assign the 0, 1, or 2 rating, and at the end of each review, we'll see where my final score of the film lands, and you will have had every step of my thought process along the way there. Got it? Good. They say Superman can travel faster than a speeding bullet. I don't think they were talking about this, but let's roll with it. Today, I'm sipping on one of my go-to bottles of whiskey, Bulleit Bourbon, and reviewing the films Sovereign and Superman. Cheers. If this one wasn't on your radar, I get it. We're in blockbuster season, but before I get to the high-profile title, I really think this movie is worth some of your attention. This is my review for Sovereign. Inspired by real events, Sovereign is a tense and provocative true crime thriller about a father and his teenage son who follow the sovereign citizen belief system, a deeply anti-establishment worldview rooted in distrust of government authority. As the pair travel across the country delivering self-taught legal seminars and pushing back against systems they believe have failed them, their journey brings them into conflict with Police Chief Jim Bouchart, setting off a tragic chain of events that forces a reckoning with power, principle, and the limits of freedom. The primary cast in this story includes Jacob Tremblay, playing Joseph, the teenager in the synopsis, and Nick Offerman, playing Jerry, who has made a precarious lifestyle of trying to thwart the laws of society with his misguided splitting of hairs on legal semantics. In a B-plot that comes along later in the film as a result of a disruptive scene caused by Jerry, we're introduced to Jim, a seasoned police chief played by Dennis Quaid, and eventually we meet his adult son, Adam, played by Thomas Mann, who is following in Jim's footsteps with his own career in law enforcement while raising an infant of his own. These father-son relationships exist in completely different worlds. Jerry and Joseph's lives can be described as tumultuous at best, as Jerry evades responsibility while trying to travel and share, or I guess more like preach, his anti-establishment ideologies to a loyal fan base of fellow victims of the system. Jim and Adam, on the other hand, live stable, middle-class lives with their spouses and within the rules of society. Jacob Tremblay owns being the small, insecure, and impressionable teenager so well that his plight in the story is visceral. Like, how does a child this codependent on his mentally unwell father choose between supporting the erratic behavior of the person he trusts and doing what he feels is sane and right? Jacob's performance captures this struggle perfectly, with his position in this story often being a source of tension in the scenes. Thomas Mann, on the other hand, is given a less troubled role. Despite being perpetually exposed to a crying infant, intense physical training, and a grouchy old man of a father, Thomas is able to imbue his character with level-headedness, a singular source of tranquility amongst the film's mounting tension. But the heavy hitters in this cast are, of course, the headliners, Dennis Quaid and Nick Offerman. More than 20 years after The Day After Tomorrow, Dennis Quaid remains proficient at being the well-intentioned yet difficult to connect with father. Here in Sovereign, his grumpy attitude can seem like a barrier between him and Adam, but Dennis is a pro at transitioning from being that rough around the edges guy to a tender and emotionally vulnerable teddy bear, a development we get to see in his portrayal of Jim. And then there is Nick Offerman. who is absolutely exceptional at exhibiting the delusional nature of his character. Even when not much is happening, Nick's presence in a scene can easily conjure stress and anxiety as you wonder when and how his next outburst will transpire. This is a standout performance that audiences who see this movie will remember Nick Offerman by. The cast is absolutely exceptional in this film, and I give high praise to them for making their dynamic with each other an integral part of Sovereign's tension. Executing a slow-build dramatic thriller is extremely challenging, as particular attention has to be paid to pacing. Spend too much time meandering through the minutiae of the story, and the film can be perceived as boring. But add too much action too often, and the desperation to hold the audience's attention becomes glaring. Sovereign successfully finds the proper balance, while juggling both sides of this story. Sovereign wears its themes on its sleeve. Father-son relationships are clearly a pillar that holds this narrative up, and as I've mentioned, the dynamic of the cast properly support this objective. This is a film that also naturally kicks up conversation about mental health in America and social inequalities that are a product of our economic systems and firearm access. But what's remarkable about this movie is that it's not here to distill complicated topics down to simple solutions. In fact, Sovereign isn't positioned to impose any answers on its viewers. This is a film that challenges audiences to feel empathy even through circumstances we feel conflicted about. We're not given protagonists to root for or antagonists to dislike. Sovereign gives us people. Individuals who have their own motivations and their own reasons for their decisions and behaviors. They're complicated and flawed and sometimes entirely out of line, but also sometimes understandable. Jim, for example, can be a hard ass and overly insistent on his way being the right way. But we're also given moments to recognize he's only this way towards his son because he cares deeply about him, even though he's not great at expressing it. And Jerry is overtly unstable and entirely misguided, but a key conversation between him and his son tenderly illuminates the source of his anger and mistrust of the systems we're subjected to. Sovereign gives audiences the space and context to dislike these characters' choices, but simultaneously understand where they're coming from and feel empathy for them in their situations. In addition to the cast being stellar, the writing is one of the highlight features of this film. Sovereign is very wise about how it uses music. Very simple, very minimal. It's acoustic when things are calm, but tense and beating when tensions are rising. As one who is heavily influenced by a compelling score, I do personally wish the music had been able to offer a little more. But sometimes less is more, and with so much working in favor of this viewing experience, the decision to keep the music subdued makes enough sense. All of this accumulates to make Sovereign a tense and engaging film to watch. It's one of those movies that really keeps you on the edge of your seat wondering what's going to happen next or how things are going to play out. I mean, there's a moment towards the climax where the tension reaches a fever pitch, and what happens in that scene completely catches me off guard. Like, jaw-dropping, oh my god, I did not see that coming kind of moment. This is what I think compelling storytelling in film should look like. From start to finish, I was dialed into Sovereign, and it serves as entirely worthy counter-programming to this month's onslaught of big-budget, CGI-filled action extravaganzas. I'm happy this film hit my radar, and by the end of the year, I am confident Sovereign will be in my conversations as one of the most memorable films of the year. Sovereign lands at an 11 out of 12 for real score, 4.5 out of 5 stars. On the subject of smaller film projects to pay attention to, I want to take a quick moment to shout out some Miami-based short film projects friends of mine are working on. Those of you who have started your countdown to Halloween right after the 4th of July might be interested to hear about Slice Night, a horror short film from fellow Fifth Leg Table Reads participant and filmmaker Alejandro Cardozo. The project has an Etsy shop and social media accounts you can follow to support the project. And my friend Noah Salzman just recently kicked off crowdfunding for his documentary short called Second Amendment Summer. What if we gathered a few trans friends and started teaching them about gun safety and took them out to the range to practice? And what if we filmed that and shared it with the world? Well, that caught my attention. You can learn more about both of these projects in the description of this video. Now, on to the next movie review. 3 weeks ago, I was worried about being underwhelmed by this summer blockbuster. 3 days ago, I watched the movie. 3 hours ago, I finished the script. 3 minutes ago, I felt a jolt of excitement that I get to share this review with you. This is my review for Superman. Superman must reconcile his alien Kryptonian heritage with his human upbringing as reporter Clark Kent. Bearing the weight of unexpected new revelations, as well as conflicts both at home and abroad, Superman must continue trying to fight for good, even as arch-nemesis Lex Luthor stacks the odds against him. It's a tall order to follow up Henry Cavill's portrayal of Superman, but let me tell you, David Cornsweet was up to the task. James Gunn's vision of a Superman film, though, is much more vibrant and playful. So, while it's clear David drew inspiration from past Superman performances, including studying Christopher Reeves, Brandon Roth, and of course, Henry Cavill, he understood the assignment and perfectly aligned with the version of Superman this movie needed. Joining David as a headlining character is Rachel Brosnahan as Lois Lane. In this film, not only does Lois know that Clark is Superman, but we start the film a few months into their romantic relationship. And damn, do those two know how to make out with each other. But beyond the passionate makeout moments, Rachel makes for a stellar Lois Lane, being able to embody confidence in her career, vulnerability about her relationship, and assuredness in her motivations all at the same time. And then there's the main villain of this story, Lex Luthor, a role helmed by one of my favorite working actors right now, Nicholas Hoult. And while Nicholas does his very best to embody this narcissistic billionaire, I'm afraid the writing and story fail him, which I'll talk about more in a minute. There are moments where Nicholas delivers that ruthlessness and unhinged factor, but those moments when I think, man, this is a menacing villain, well, those moments are fleeting, and I found myself waiting indefinitely for something more gripping from this version of Lex Luthor. A trio of heroes, half-heartedly called the Justice Gang, aid the Superman narrative, including Guy Gardner, a Green Lantern, played by Nathan Fillion, and Hawkgirl, played by Isabella Merced. And although they kind of dart in and out of the film, Nathan and Isabella each carry their contrasting personalities well for making their engagements in the scenes they're a part of dynamic and comedic. But for me, the character who absolutely stole the show in this movie is Eddie Gathegi as Mr. Terrific. His deadpan dialogue delivery is fertile ground for so much of the film's comedy. Despite being a supporting character, Eddie's performance as Mr. Terrific is a standout feature in this Superman movie, and I can already see him instantly becoming a highly cosplayed figure and Halloween costume icon. James Gunn is an expert at assembling the right ensembles for his superhero stories, and Superman is no exception. And when I'm inclined to rewatch Superman again, it will largely be to experience the thrills and comedy generated by this cast's dynamic. Overall, Superman is a good-looking film, and I'm not just talking about the cast. As you might expect from a modern Superman movie, the action sequences are big set pieces, and the movie lives up to expectations for fun and thrilling fight sequences, and it all looks sufficiently believable. We've reached an era where big-budget action movies have gotten complacent about the final look of CGI work, Marvel having become one of the most egregious offenders in this area when you watch movies like Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness and Captain America: Brave New World. And as a side note, me 10 years ago would be appalled to know that me right now is taking shots at the MCU in a DC review. Absolutely wild how much my perspective on the superhero movie rivalry has changed. But as I was watching this movie, one of the buddies I went with leaned over multiple times to express how great the visual effects in this movie looked, and I could actively agree with him. So visual effects and editing gets a thumbs up from me. Now the story is where I have less glowing things to say about Superman as a movie. Convoluted is a generous way to describe the plot of Superman, as it awkwardly stretches itself in too many directions for the sake of scope and scale. There's the domestic conflicts, which of course involves the viability of Clark Kent and Lois Lane's relationship, Lex Luthor's elaborate plans to end Superman, monster fights in Metropolis, and Superman's fractured reputation among the public while he's grappling with his identity on Earth. But then, there's this foreign conflict that ties to Lex Luthor's master plan, with a corrupt leader and a mystery around how this situation is connected to Luthor Corp. And then there's a whole thing about this pocket universe that has to cover Superman's incarceration, introduce a new character, incorporate a black hole in the plot, and details Superman's rescue and escape from this pocket universe. Like I said, convoluted. And what makes the convolution even more egregious is how inconsequential so many of these conflicts end up being. Like with many blockbusters, the high stakes in Superman come in the form of mass destruction or the threat of mass destruction. And that just means so little when the destruction doesn't have permanent or lasting consequences. So not only do many of the plot points really weigh on your suspension of disbelief, but the resolution to these events are just outright preposterous. Like, just wait until you see the script's solution for escaping the gravitational pull of a black hole, or how it resolves the void of the universe ripping through Metropolis. Because so much of this story is ridiculous, pitching insurmountable scenarios, then choosing the laziest ways to resolve them, I never actually feel like there's anything truly at risk. The film is also thoroughly encoded with social and political parallels to current hot-button topics. Obviously, there's the illegal alien thing, which the movie very consciously leans into, and the pocket universe serving as a prison for individuals disliked by someone with extreme power, and the not-so-subtle jab at the idea of billionaires being kings. The movie is certainly a left-leaning take on these social and political issues, but does the movie benefit from these themes being sort of patchworked into this already convoluted narrative? I mean, not really. Not for me, at least. The more I think about the film's efforts to message about foreign conflicts and campaign against the detaining of people deemed undesirable, or the attempt to assassinate Donald Trump's character via the behavior of Lex Luthor, the more glaring and problematic the film's narrative structure becomes. And that has nothing to do with my personal opinions about these issues. I mean, talk to me offline if you want to talk politics. But my personal opinion about the movie, or specifically the movie's plot, is that it is often too distracted by this interest in being tangential to current events to tell a better focused and more cohesive story well. The movie clearly has a lot of its mind concerned with real-world issues, but it contorts the story more than I prefer to accommodate that mindfulness. Between that and lazy conflict resolution, I just can't really get on board with the narrative foundation that Superman is built on. On a more positive note though, it's hard to mess up the score and soundtrack when you're working with something as iconic as the Superman theme. Superman, as you might expect, is full of big heroic moments set to the bombastic tune of that Superman theme. There is no shortage of shots and sequences of Superman rising from the ashes or posing in overexposed light of the sun. The big stakes of this movie may not lead to satisfying resolutions, but damn does this movie know how to capitalize on framing Superman in the most epic ways, all supported by swelling music. The usage of music is spot on in this movie. So look, Superman is not a masterpiece. James Gunn has proven over and over again that he is proficient at crafting entertaining, large-scale superhero team-up movies, and that's exactly what he does here. Does he have the story to push this movie into gut-wrenching, beautifully heartbreaking, sugar at the bottom of the bowl territory? Definitely not. But James Gunn comes in on assignment, delivering a final product that is comical, vibrant, and action-packed. It's colorful and lighthearted enough to appeal to younger viewers, but isn't afraid to be more adult in how sexualized some of the characters are, or how casually it can drop a swear word. Ultimately, it's a fun time, entirely on brand with James Gunn's superhero filmmaking, and if you're not thinking too much about the plot, there's a lot to enjoy about this movie. In the moment while watching this movie in IMAX, which, by the way, I do recommend, I was very much into it. But for me, it's a movie that isn't aging as well in my head as I scrutinize the execution of its themes and story. It's an easy film to recommend to just about anyone wanting a good time at the theater. I mean, Superman is as blockbuster as blockbusters get, and I'm confident it'll do gangbusters at the box office. Next time though, let's bandage the story a little bit better, and let's be a little more compelling about how we explore our themes, shall we? Superman lands at a 9 out of 12 ForReel score, 3.5 out of 5 stars. You can visit ForReel to read more reviews, watch podcasts, and take in content from me and my awesome team of writers and content creators at thisisforreal.com. This is Real Buzzed. Be wise, drink responsibly, and if you like this video and you want to see more, hit like and subscribe.